The podcast you are about to listen to contains at least one of the following: strong language, disturbing topics, abusive opinions, generally things that aren't appropriate for little kids or overly sensitive people. So, if any of that stuff's going to get your nose out of joint, this is your chance to turn it off. Welcome to I Had to Say It, the podcast where I talk about things that I feel need talking about, and sometimes they're not getting the attention they deserve. And your feelings, they're not under consideration. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Had to Say It. Today we're going to talk about something that it's going to kind of tie back into some of the other more usual rants, plus it's going to cover a few things that maybe I haven't necessarily given my thoughts on, so we're going to see where we go from here. So I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and it's something that is relevant to all of us. We all live on the same frickin' planet. So this is relevant to literally everyone that could possibly hear this within the next 2 weeks. I don't know if the sound waves will actually carry out into outer space where some alien's going to pick up on it and go, wow, this is another place we should need to avoid like the fucking plague. But anyway, the thing I've been thinking about is, and it's just, as I've been looking around, the seasons are not what I remember. I've never been somebody that denies climate change, and I understand to a certain extent it is a natural cyclical thing. Even some of the stuff the deniers say may not necessarily be completely off base, but it's still shitty science. Trying to say humanity is not having an impact on the planet, as we are definitely outstripping and outpacing the planet's ability to sustain us, and really not doing our part to be more conscientious and be better curators of the planet, if you will. And so this is what I've been thinking the last few days, and it has to do a lot with the weather. This has been some of the hottest, driest weather I've seen in years, and it's bordering on ridiculous the way things have changed over the last few years. And the thing is, I'm not necessarily one of those super, ultra green people. I think being more responsible about how we handle things is definitely key to keeping this planet around to support our future generations. And I am definitely in favor of certain measures to reduce our carbon footprint and our impact on this planet. I am a huge fan of reusing things. I think plastic bottles are horrible. There are green alternatives to plastic. There are plastics that are made from plant materials, but ultimately, at the end of the day, plastic is a terrible thing. And I'm not one of those fruit bats who walks around, screaming at people that their straws are going to kill the turtles. Their straws are going to kill the turtles. But I'm not going to get in somebody else's face about it. I'm not agro-eco, which is a thing. But I do realize the impact we have on this planet, and there are things you can do to avoid that. Do I carry around a metal straw with me? No, I don't use a damn straw. I pick up my glass and I drink out of it. That's just the way it works. I understand there are some people that need straws for various medical reasons, or if you just had your teeth cleaned or whatever, and you don't want to stain your teeth as much. It's a way to help avoid getting liquids on your teeth. But that's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. If you did need to use a straw, I don't see the problem in using a reusable, washable one. It makes perfect sense to me. The disposable mindset that this country has gotten into is a problem, and unfortunately, the science behind recycling is, as much as it's a good concept, things like plastic are not a fantastic recyclable material, because even after they're broken down and restructured, you still have a limited amount of use you're going to get out of them. That's the actual science behind recycling things. Now, recycling glass, recycling metal, that's a little more practical from a usability standpoint. These are things that can be melted down and restructured and reused. But if you have glass containers and they're not busted glass, there's no reason why you can't reuse them. You can't wash them out, let them dry, clean them, sanitize them. They are reusable. I think the concepts behind the no packaging grocery stores is actually an awesome idea. Is it a new idea? Well, for us it's new. That's a throwback to general stores in the settler days. It's not a new concept that you bring a container to the store and the clerk fills it up with whatever you purchase, and then you take your container and you go home and you use the container until it's empty, and then you wash it, you dry it, and you go to the store and you fill it up again. Reusing things and utilizing things more than one time makes a lot more impact from an ecological standpoint than any of these recycling programs that have been put in place, because they have good marketing campaigns and it makes people feel like they're doing some good. And I hate to break this to you, but the vast majority of people who are using their bin recycling programs where they have something where they wheel their recyclables out to the curb every week, you're probably doing it wrong. If you're not rinsing out your containers and separating things and making sure certain things don't have their lids on them, because the lids aren't recyclable even though the containers are. And if the containers still have food in them, they are not really supposed to be being put in the bin to be recycled. So if you're not rinsing out your cans and your plasticware and all these other things and then putting them in the recycling bin, you're technically not doing it right. And depending on who's handling your recycling processes, it may just wind up in a landfill anyway, because they're not going to deal with cleaning your shit before they can process it. So while I'm sitting here pissing down the necks of everybody who thinks they're doing some good for the planet, and more power to you, keep trying. By all means, do not give up. We only got the one planet. We do got to take care of it. Better care of it. But here's some other issues I want to address, and I'm sure some people will probably get bent out of shape when want to have their opinions. And my lines are always open. The communication lines are always there. Please feel free. Reach out to me on social media. Email me. Leave me a message. If you go to the website, there's a phone number. You can call me up and cuss me out. Well, not live, because I probably won't answer, but I do check the messages, and you can leave me an angry rant, and I'll listen to it. And just be advised, it may wind up as a sound clip in a future episode. But if I think you have a valid point, I'll acknowledge that as well. I am flexible. But the thing is, a lot of this stuff, it's good intentions, but it's not being executed properly, or it's not actually good in practice. And we need a genuine mental shift. We need to understand that certain things that we're being told are green, we're being told are the way to minimize our impact on things, really aren't. We still have very much of a disposable mindset in this country. And unfortunately, it shows in a lot of ways where if you stop and look at it, it's a little more apparent if you look at it with the mindset of what goes into doing this. And you get a lot of things where there's a lot of virtue signaling going on, and a lot of people saying, oh, well, I'm doing this, so I'm doing my part to help out. But they're not looking at any of the side effects of what they're, so-called doing their part is actually doing. And one of the things that I've been coming back to a lot recently, due to some events in my local area, is all these people who seem to think electric cars are somehow going to save the planet. And the people pushing to mandate only electric vehicles by whatever date. There are some genuine issues that have never been addressed by these things. People don't talk about them because they don't want to bring up the fact that yes, there's no emissions, so you're reducing your greenhouse gas output from the vehicle itself. We still need electricity to power the plants and the factories that are going to manufacture the vehicles. The vehicles still require batteries, which, once they have become dead cells, are literally toxic waste. They do not have a way to recycle them, rejuvenate them, or repurpose them. They are literally poison for the planet. And we don't have a way to deal with that. There's no way to neutralize it. There's no way to make it safe where it is not a toxic component. So you get these massive, and that's true all the way down to little tiny batteries that are in our headphones and our Walkmans. And at least the lithium-ion ones are rechargeable to a certain extent. But the small batteries last a lot longer, and they have a lot less negative end result because it's about volume, basically. Those big-ass batteries that are made to run a vehicle, and on top of that, they only run it for so long before they have to be recharged. The energy that recharges them has to come from somewhere. They're not kinetically charged. They don't recharge themselves by moving. So, that electricity has to come from somewhere. So it's either going to come from a coal-fired electric plant or possibly a nuclear power plant, or in a very slight, some areas, wind-driven turbines. And those gigantic windmill farms, it's a nice concept. They generate a lot of energy, but they are another thing where the massive amount of stuff that is involved in keeping those things maintained and running really is not offsetting the ecological impact they're having, because they still have to use helicopters to de-ice the blades. Those helicopters don't run on happy thoughts and dreams. They run on fuel, They still have to mine the minerals and the metals to make the windmills. All that stuff has an output. All that stuff has an impact. And I'm derailing myself here, but not to get off the subject of these horrendous electric car batteries that are super, like I said, this is in my mind because there was recently, in the next town over from where I live, there was a massive fire that was caused by a warehouse full of these dead electric car batteries catching on fire that literally resulted in the sections of the town being evacuated because the fire department didn't have the resources to properly deal with the fire, and it basically had to be allowed to burn out, emitting tons of toxic fumes into the area. Air quality was terrible. The moon was orange for like a week because of all this shit in the atmosphere from this. And realistically, it's not a good thing. We need to understand that. So instead of jumping on board and saying everybody needs to have these electric cars and if you've ever looked at the mining facilities that they use to get the minerals and the elements to make these batteries, they are humongous. It looks like literally into like artwork depicting the pits of hell. It is not a real green eco thing, but nobody sees that part of thing, and nobody wants to see that part of things because there's a lot of ugly truth behind some really pretty thoughts here. And I want to save the planet, but we need to stop being so narrow-viewed and saying this is the future and this is the only way. There are all kinds of alternative options out there. There are companies that are looking into hydrogen cell vehicles. They still have batteries, they still run on batteries, but they use hydrogen fuel. You know what the side effect of, or the after effect, the after product of hydrogen fuel cells is? Water. Clean, pure fucking water. That's it. Yes, filling them up with hydrogen, there's all kinds of other complications, but they're not terrible. And they are available, they are out there. They're hydrogen cell vehicles being manufactured by 3 different manufacturers right now. They get better mileage than any of the electric cars. You have to fill up less than you have to recharge your electric car. You get longer driving distances, so you can actually go farther between fill-ups. These are things that people don't take into account. And now, realistically, people are so busy being smug because they've got these electric cars, and this is not. And I've seen so many more Teslas on the road right now in the last few months, and it used to just be the Priuses. They were, the granddaddy of the electric car as far as the current age goes. There were electric cars going farther back, but they've never been practical. They've never been a very viable alternative. And they've gotten higher output electric engines, which is really the only reason these cars have come into mainstream acceptance, is because they're almost able to match the performance in some cases of internal combustion engines. And it seems like people have just said, okay, this is what we're going to switch to, and they've stopped trying, they've stopped looking, they've stopped asking for other options. And I feel like it's a very poorly thought out, ill-informed concept, is to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, without being fully equipped on the facts. And I'm concerned about the future. I'm worried about my kids and my grandkids and my line going down into perpetuity. I want them to still have a fucking planet. And we get all these people that are bitching and moaning about the billionaires who are using their fortunes to do things like go into space in this, private funded space race. But contrary to what a lot of people think, the private sector and these stupid little ego projects, for lack of a better term, they're vanity projects. That's what they are. These rich pricks are using their fortunes to attach their name to something significant because they want to be remembered and they want to make a mark. A lot of these vanity projects, this is not a new concept, it's just a new phase. Going to space is the new thing. Setting up private ships to Mars and shit like that, that is the current thing. But I hate to say it, well, I don't hate to say it, I hate that people need to be told this shit. That is all of history. All of human history is the people who had shit funded people who didn't have shit to do smart things for them, or to do brave things for them, or to do whatever that caused all of human history. All of the exploration, all of the trade routes that were established back to the dawn of civilization, when we first started communicating between tribes, it was funded by the people who were in charge and the people who held the resources. enacted by the people who had the skill sets to do it. And that is how progress happens. So the people that are bitching about Bezos launching himself into space, I'm annoyed that he came back. I would have been perfectly fine leaving his ass in the atmosphere, but that's how progress works. These rich guys fund these projects, and things happen, and things change, and they find out new ways to do things. They find out better ways to do things. And then that kind of disperses into the general knowledge base. And yeah, there's a better than even probability that whoever figures out the first economical way to do things like space transport and things like that, they're going to hold it in a monopoly for a long time. But eventually it's going to get reverse engineered. It's going to get broken down, and it's going to spread. It's going to become more common. These are going to be advancements that are going to help our society. And right here, we're going to take a real quick break, and we'll come back with the rest of my thoughts on this matter.
Oh my god. John, were you up on Wikipedia all night?
John, are you okay? You're shaking.
You guys, you will not believe what I just read on Wiki. Welcome to Reddit on Wiki, the poorly researched, semi-funny podcast on random stuff we find on the internet.
Who are you talking to?
And why are you shaking so much?
Subscribe to Reddit on Wiki on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Sean, I'm scared.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
All right, thanks for listening to that, guys, and here we go. There's way too many people that are almost Luddites, and that's probably a term that doesn't hold a lot of significance to people anymore, because it's not, without going into a whole thing about our educational system, it's not a real well-known thing anymore. Luddites were people who, at one point in the Industrial Revolution, were going in and breaking into factories and smashing machinery because they felt that this machinery was a threat to jobs and to their way of life. All this technology was evil. Industrial assembly lines were evil. Never mind that it generated eventually much better quality of life for everyone on the planet. Or, well, almost everyone, let's face it. There's still real shitholes on this planet where people are treated like garbage or treated like currency. Neither of which is acceptable in my book, but that's a whole different episode. But it's this closed-minded approach towards this is the only right way to do things. And the problem is, now the people that think they're being progressive and think they're doing things the way that is best for the world, and this is not a new concept either, but so being so closed-minded and just narrow-minded and convinced of your way has got to be the right way it's stupid. You're closing off options of progress. You're looking at things because certain groups are saying, oh, well, that way isn't going to work. And without looking at what their interests are, there's a reason that people like Elon Musk, who, yeah, he's smarter than the average bear, but he is not the be-all, end-all. He's not all-knowing. And he's talked about how hydrogen, he's like basically mocked the hydrogen cell concept, but look at how much he has invested in battery-operated vehicles and how much he has put behind that and how much he has put into that. So an alternative electric vehicle that is not operating on a structure dependent on what he's endorsed and what he's backed does pose complications for him. And so we need to take that into consideration, because all these super ultra rich guys between Musk and Bezos and Branson from Virgin, these guys, they're not really trying to, save the world, but they are going to be one of the keys to getting it done. Way more so than any politicians or legislation or any of this other bullshit, because literally, if you haven't figured out, that's all got so much of an agenda behind it. And realistically, anybody that's bitching about these billionaires spending their money how they want, well, other than the fact that that's, kind of how money works. That's the whole point. That's how you motivate yourself to get more of it, is by doing things you want to do for yourself. But the people that are pissing and moaning about, oh, well, he could have fixed this or he could have fixed that instead. First off, he has no obligation to save the world. It's not a requirement. They don't owe it to anybody. So, realistically, bitching about that and getting mad, you can talk a lot of shit about what you would do, but until you're in that position, you don't actually know how you're going to behave. And you can think the best of yourself, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually what you would do. Those kind of hypotheticals piss me off. It's kind of ridiculous to say, oh, well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't do that, or if I was in this position. If you had the mentality that you have, that's one of the reasons you're not in that position to begin with. The mindset of how you think the world should work is part of what shapes your world. So let's get over that first. But second off, let's look at, people that are bitching and moaning about spending $1 billion on this or spending $1 billion on that. How about we address the trillions of dollars the U.S. government wastes every year? The massive amount of debt that's being racked up. The fact that they give monies to countries that hate us to further their own agenda, not out of any humanitarian need, not out of any goal, not out of trying to cause any help. It's all about leverage and trying to get people to do what they want. And it's a lot easier for these politicians to be doing it because it's not like they're using their money. They're using our money. They're spending our money for us. And they're incurring all kinds of shit decisions and pushing their own agendas with our stuff. And I'm not going to turn this into a political rant, but it is something you need to think about before you start bitching about some rich guy that decided to do something that at some point may be beneficial to all of us, as opposed to the government who does things which are beneficial to no one but themselves. And that'll be me getting off that horse for the moment. And like I said, between the battery fire in the next town over that dumped just insane amounts of toxins in the air, the fact that we have this mentality of just horribly just consumerism, and I'm not opposed to consumerism in and of itself, but it's the methodology behind it. The single-use, disposable society that we've become. Pretty much everything on the planet at this point, you can get single-use. People get, cell phones, use them for 6 months, a year, and then throw it out and get the new one. That has one of those toxic little batteries in it. That has gold, and it has precious metals in it that makes up the circuitry. It has a bunch of things that aren't going to break down in any frickin' landfill, and it's things that could be reused, things that could be recycled, things that still have a good life in them. I'm one of the people, I don't get rid of my phones until they are literally a brick, and then I take them to a phone recycling place because they can harvest the metals out of it, and there are ways to get at least some utility out of what's left of it. And another thing that got me thinking about all this single-use consumerism that we've gotten so used to was today on my drive home. The wife and I were out running some errands, had to take the dog to get some shots and stuff like that. And as we were driving home, it was around, 11:45, noonish. And all these places we drove by, every fast food restaurant in the area just had a massive line of cars around it. Now, I'm not really tripping about the cars because, it's necessary evil, I guess. But it got me, that was another, our very single-use society and I'm speaking as somebody who comes from the service industry, from the restaurant industry. And the thing about it is, I remember years ago when all the fast food places used styrofoam containers. And to the younger people out there, this may sound really weird, but there was a time where McDonald's and Burger King and all these big industry guys were using, it went from cardboard packages to styrofoam containers because the styrofoam containers kept your food hot longer. Then there was pushback because styrofoam containers broke down into chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, and were destroying the environment. They found out about it and they switched over to wrapping everything in paper, which is the way it is now. That is so much more preferable than a lot of the shit that's going on out there. And so that's a single-use kind of purchase that's not a bad thing. It's a biodegradable breakdown kind of material being used, as long as you're not getting the foil-lined paper wrappers. So a lot of the places have gotten away from that. A few of them still do it for certain things, but ultimately, yeah, that's at least moving in the right direction, right? As long as you're not one of the people that gets, 2 or 3 salads and those come in, yep, you guessed it, plastic containers. And I'm not here just to bag on plastic. Plastic has its use. It has its places. The problem with plastic is when it is being treated as single-use solutions for so much stuff. And I'm not one of those people that's going to go out there. I'm not going to throw paint on you for wearing fur. I'm not going to get in your face for driving a big diesel truck or whatever. Actually, diesel's cleaner than regular fuel. Remember that. Biodiesel, it's a real thing. It's something we should really be taking more seriously. It'd be a lot easier to convert a lot of existing vehicles to run on biodiesel fuel if they already have a standard diesel engine. So, things we need to think about, but people have just pushed all this other viable alternative science to the side because some marketing campaigns told them this is the way and this is the future. And so that's kind of my issue with the whole thing. You're just buying so quickly into these things and then getting this air of smugness about yourself because you think you're somehow better and you're somehow doing more for the world than the rest of us. So ultimately, it's a matter of, are we doing this for the right reasons? Are we doing the right thing? We need to sit back. We need to reassess it. We need to be more globally conscious. Because here's the other thing about that. All these amazingly, stunningly arrogant fuckheads who think that these things are going to be mandated in this country and it's going to become the thing that's going to save the world seems to forget we are not the entire fucking world. And by and wide, a lot of the rest of the planet, some of it's better than us, some of it's worse. It all has an impact. So even if you're buying these things and you're thinking that you feel good about yourself because you're being so ecologically conscious, look at where it came from. Look at where it's sourced. Look at how it was made. We need to be more conscientious. We need to look deeper. And I guess for now, that's what I had to say. Thanks for listening to another episode of I Had to Say It. If you liked what you heard, leave a review, give us a follow, give me some feedback. And if you didn't like what you heard, leave a review, give me a follow, give me some feedback. I'll try and fix it. Check us out on all the social media platforms. At I Had to Say It podcast is the trigger for all that stuff, for the search term. And if you want, check out the website, www.ihadtosayitpodcast.com. There's links to people that have been involved with the program, things I've talked about. There are some links available for some merch that we're working on, and there are ways to contact us there as well. And thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.